The crisp winter air bit through the thin blanket as a young mother cradled her 3-month-old daughter in the back seat of her 2008 Honda Civic. This had been their home for the past 2 weeks, parked in different spots around Atlanta to avoid drawing attention. The baby's quiet whimpers echoed through the small space as her mother tried to warm her tiny hands with her breath. Life hadn't always been this way for the 26-year-old former dental assistant. Just 6 months ago, she had a stable job, a cozy apartment, and dreams of giving her daughter the life she deserved. But a complicated pregnancy forced her to take extended leave, and medical bills started piling up. One missed rent payment led to another, and before she knew it, eviction notices began appearing on her door. That fateful morning, she had parked outside a grocery store, hoping to use the last few dollars on her EBT card for some baby formula. As she carefully counted the change in her wallet, a towering figure cast a shadow over her car. Her heart skipped a beat. Being noticed was the last thing she wanted. The figure approached closer, and through her foggy window, she recognized the familiar face of Shaquille O'Neal, the NBA legend. He had noticed the baby car seat and the pile of belongings in the back, signs that told a story no mother should have to tell. Instead of walking past, Shaq knocked gently on her window. Reluctantly, she rolled it down, trying to hide her embarrassment behind a weak smile. But Shaq's warm presence immediately put her at ease. "I couldn't help but notice you and your little one," he said, his voice filled with genuine concern. "Would you mind sharing your story with me?" Through tears and trembling words, she explained her situation, the difficult pregnancy, the mounting medical bills, the loss of her job, and finally, the eviction that left them with nowhere to go. She hadn't told her family, too proud to admit how far she had fallen, too afraid of their judgment. Shaq listened intently, his expression growing more determined with each detail of her story. He had grown up watching his own mother struggle to make ends meet, and something about this young mother's resilience struck a chord deep within him. Without hesitation, he pulled out his phone. No mother and child should spend another night in their car, he declared, already dialing numbers. Within hours, he had arranged for a hotel room nearby, ensuring they would have a warm, safe place to sleep that night. But Shaq wasn't done. This was just the beginning of how he would change their lives. Word spread quickly through the local community about Shaq's encounter in the grocery store parking lot. While many celebrities might have stopped at the hotel room, those who knew Shaq understood this was just the first step in his plan to help this family get back on their feet. The young mother sat on the hotel bed that evening, her daughter peacefully sleeping in a proper crib for the first time in weeks. She couldn't stop the tears from flowing, not tears of sadness this time, but of overwhelming gratitude. As she watched her baby sleep, she dared to hope again, all because a basketball legend took the time to notice a struggling mother in a grocery store parking lot. Little did she know, this chance encounter would spark a chain of events that would not only transform her life but inspire a community to come together in ways she never imagined. Shaq's intervention was about to become more than just a moment of celebrity kindness. It would grow into a movement that would touch countless lives beyond her own. That night, as she finally lay down in a real bed, she couldn't help but marvel at how life could change in an instant. Just that morning, she had been counting change for formula. Now, she was taking the first step toward a new beginning. She knew tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for the first time in weeks, she felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the hotel window, warming the young mother's face as she fed her daughter. A gentle knock at the door revealed Shaq's massive frame, accompanied by a social worker he had contacted the previous evening. His commitment hadn't ended with the hotel room, it was just beginning. "I've been thinking about your situation all night," Shaq said, settling into a chair that seemed too small for his large frame. "We're going to tackle this step by step." The social worker, a kind-faced woman with graying hair, nodded in agreement as she spread out various forms and resources on the small hotel desk. Over the next few hours, they crafted a plan. Shaq had already reached out to several of his business connections in Atlanta. One owned a dental practice that was looking to hire an assistant, and another managed an apartment complex with affordable units. But what touched the young mother's heart most was how Shaq listened to her dreams and fears, treating her not as a charity case, but as a person who had hit a rough patch and needed support to get back on track. The social worker explained various assistance programs she qualified for, programs she hadn't known existed. As they talked, her daughter crawled around the hotel room floor, occasionally pulling herself up on furniture, making everyone smile with her determined little steps. That afternoon, Shaq insisted on taking them shopping. The mother tried to protest, but he wouldn't hear of it. "Every baby needs proper supplies," he said firmly, his eyes twinkling as he watched the little one attempt to grab his finger with her tiny hand. At the store, he filled cart after cart with diapers, formula, clothes, and baby essentials. Other shoppers did double takes, some pulling out their phones to record, but Shaq remained focused on the task at hand. What touched everyone's hearts wasn't just the shopping spree, but how Shaq got down on one knee to let the baby play with his championship ring, making silly faces that had her giggling uncontrollably. Here was one of basketball's greatest legends, completely unbothered by his public image, simply focused on bringing joy to a child who had spent her first months of life in the back of a car. Word of Shaq's intervention spread through social media, but not in the way most celebrity stories do. There were no flashy posts or promotional videos, just genuine moments captured by onlookers touched by what they witnessed. Local news stations began picking up the story, not for its sensation, but for its heart. The response from the community was overwhelming. A local furniture store offered to furnish whatever apartment they found. A pediatrician volunteered to provide free checkups for the baby. Small business owners reached out, wanting to contribute what they could. What started as one man's act of kindness was transforming into a community-wide effort to support a struggling mother and her child. That evening, back at the hotel, the young mother sat reading through job applications while her daughter slept peacefully in the crib. Her phone buzzed with a message from Shaq. He had arranged for her to interview at the dental practice the next morning. He even made sure she had professional clothes to wear, delivered by a local boutique owner who had heard the story. As she prepared for bed, she found herself thinking about how different things were from just 24 hours ago. It wasn't just the material help, though that was significant. It was the restoration of her dignity, the reminder that she wasn't alone, and the realization that sometimes accepting help wasn't a sign of weakness but a step toward strength. The next few days would be crucial: job interviews, apartment viewings, and meetings with social services. But for the first time in months, she felt equipped to face these challenges. She had a support system now, led by an NBA legend who saw beyond her circumstances to her potential. As she drifted off to sleep, she could hear her daughter's soft breathing from the crib. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but also new opportunities. The path ahead was becoming clearer, not just because of Shaq's generosity, but because of how his actions had inspired an entire community to come together. Little did she know, the most significant changes were yet to come. The following days would test her resolve, challenge her pride, and ultimately lead to transformations she never imagined possible. But for now, she rested, grateful for the turn of events that had brought hope back into her life, one gentle gesture at a time. The morning of the job interview arrived with a mix of nerves and anticipation. The young mother stood before the hotel mirror, adjusting her new navy blazer, a gift from the local boutique owner. Her daughter sat in a bouncer nearby, contentedly playing with a soft toy Shaq had bought her the day before. A knock at the door revealed a surprise. It wasn't just the babysitter Shaq had arranged, but Shaq himself. "I thought I'd give you a ride to the interview," he said with that characteristic warm smile. "Plus, I know the owner pretty well." His presence immediately calmed her nerves. Something about his gentle giant demeanor had that effect. The dental practice was modern and welcoming, located in a busy medical complex. As they walked in, the receptionist's eyes widened at seeing Shaq, but quickly shifted her warm attention to the young mother. The practice owner, a kind-faced woman in her 50s, greeted them both with genuine enthusiasm. During the interview, the young mother's passion for dental assistance shone through. She spoke about her previous experience, her dedication to patient care, and her eagerness to return to the field she loved. The owner was impressed not just by her qualifications, but by her resilience and determination. By the end of the interview, she was offered the position with flexible hours and benefits that included childcare assistance. Tears welled up in her eyes as she accepted the offer. This wasn't charity, this was an opportunity she had earned through her skills and experience. Shaq stood outside the office, beaming like a proud brother when she emerged with the good news. "I knew you had it in you," he said, giving her a gentle fist bump. But the day's surprises weren't over. Shaq drove them to an apartment complex on the other side of town. "I thought we could look at a few places," he said casually. The property manager was expecting them, having prepared several units for viewing. Each apartment was clean and well-maintained, with proper security and nearby parks, a far cry from her previous living situation. As they walked through a sunny two-bedroom unit on the second floor, her daughter reached out toward the window, babbling excitedly at the view of trees outside. The young mother could already imagine making this space their home, a real home, not just a temporary shelter. The property manager explained the reasonable rent and flexible lease terms they could offer. What touched her most was discovering that several neighboring families had already reached out, offering to help with childcare and forming a support network. The complex had a community garden where residents grew vegetables together, and a playground where children gathered every evening. It wasn't just an apartment, it was a community. Later that afternoon, back at the hotel, she sat down with the social worker who had been helping coordinate everything. They went through her budget, factoring in her new salary, reduced rent, and various assistance programs. For the first time in months, the numbers added up. With careful planning, she could provide for her daughter and even start building a small savings. As they worked, her phone kept buzzing with messages from her family. After seeing the local news coverage, they had finally reached out. Their initial messages were full of concern and regret for not knowing about her situation sooner. Though the conversations were difficult, they were necessary steps toward rebuilding those important connections. The social worker helped her craft responses, encouraging her to be honest about her feelings while remaining open to reconciliation. Support systems are crucial, she explained, and sometimes they need to be rebuilt, not just found. The young mother nodded, understanding that her journey forward would require both new connections and mended old ones. That evening, Shaq stopped by with dinner, not from a fancy restaurant, but homemade meals prepared by his own personal chef. "You need proper nutrition," he insisted, showing her how to store and reheat the portions. As they ate together, they talked about the future. Shaq shared stories about his own mother's struggles and triumphs, creating a connection that went beyond celebrity and charity. Before leaving, Shaq surprised her with one more gift, a journal. "Write your story," he encouraged. "Someday, you'll want to remember how far you've come, and maybe your words will help someone else who's going through tough times." The simple gesture brought fresh tears to her eyes. In all the chaos of survival, she hadn't thought about preserving these moments for the future. As night fell, she sat by the hotel window, writing in her new journal while her daughter slept peacefully. She documented the whirlwind of the day, the job offer, the apartment viewing, the reconnection with family. But mostly, she wrote about hope, about how one person's kindness could ripple out and transform not just a life, but an entire community. Tomorrow would bring more steps forward, apartment paperwork to sign, work forms to complete, childcare arrangements to finalize. But tonight, she allowed herself to simply feel grateful. Her daughter's soft breathing provided a gentle soundtrack as she continued writing, preserving the memory of the day when everything began to change. Moving day arrived with the first rays of dawn. The young mother woke early, her daughter still sleeping soundly in the hotel crib. As she packed their few belongings, she could hardly believe that in just a few hours, they would have a place to call their own. The key to their new apartment sat on the nightstand, catching the morning light, a small piece of metal that represented so much more than just access to a space. True to his word, Shaq had coordinated with the local furniture store, and a truck was already parked outside the apartment complex when they arrived. But what awaited them was far more than just furniture delivery. A group of community members had gathered, ready to help. Among them were neighbors from the apartment complex, colleagues from her new dental practice, and even a few of Shaq's friends from his NBA days. The atmosphere was festive as everyone worked together. Someone had set up a portable speaker playing upbeat music, while others had brought coffee and breakfast for everyone. The furniture store had outdone themselves, each piece was carefully chosen to create a cozy, functional home. The young mother watched in amazement as her empty apartment transformed into a warm, welcoming space. What touched her most was the nursery. The community had gone above and beyond, creating a magical space for her daughter. Hand-painted butterflies decorated one wall, the work of a local artist who had heard their story. A rocking chair sat by the window, perfectly positioned to catch the morning sun. Even the ceiling had glow-in-the-dark stars arranged in actual constellations, installed by an amateur astronomer from the building. Throughout the morning, Shaq moved between helping with heavy furniture and entertaining her daughter, who had become completely fascinated by him. He had a natural way with children, making silly faces and playing peek-a-boo behind his massive frame, drawing out peals of laughter that echoed through the apartment. By early afternoon, the space was completely set up. The kitchen was stocked with essentials, clothes were hung in closets, and photos, some new, some salvaged from her car, were arranged on walls and shelves. It wasn't just a furnished apartment, it was a home filled with thoughtful touches and care from an entire community. As everyone gathered in the living room to celebrate the completion of the move, the young mother found herself overwhelmed with emotion. Looking around at all the faces, some familiar now, others still new, she saw not just helpers, but a support system that had formed around her and her daughter. Shaq, noticing her emotion, gathered everyone's attention. "This right here," he said, gesturing to the room full of people, "this is what community means. It's not just about giving help, it's about lifting each other up, about showing up when it matters." His words resonated with everyone present, many nodding in agreement. The property manager approached with another surprise. Several families from the complex had organized a rotating meal schedule for the first few weeks, ensuring she could focus on settling into her new job without worrying about cooking. Others had offered to help with childcare, creating a network of support that would prove invaluable in the coming months. As the afternoon wound down and people began to leave, each person took a moment to welcome her to the community properly. Phone numbers were exchanged, playdates were arranged, and genuine connections were formed. This wasn't charity, it was neighbors helping neighbors, exactly as it should be. Once everyone had gone, Shaq stayed behind to help with final adjustments. As they moved a lamp to better light the reading corner, he shared something personal. "You know," he said, "my mama faced similar struggles when I was young. But she never gave up, and neither did you. That's why I knew I had to help when I saw you in that parking lot." Before leaving, Shaq had one more surprise. He handed her an envelope containing information about a college savings account he had set up for her daughter. "Education is everything," he explained. "This is just a start, but with your determination, I know you'll build on it." That evening, after putting her daughter to bed in her new room, the young mother sat in her living room, taking in the quiet of her new space. She opened her journal and began to write about the day, about the incredible generosity she had witnessed, about the power of community, and about the hope that now filled her heart. As she wrote, she could hear children playing in the courtyard below, the sound of neighbors chatting on their balconies, and the gentle hum of life in a real community. Her daughter's mobile played a soft lullaby from the nursery, and for the first time in months, everything felt right. She walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, she knew, were other mothers facing similar struggles. She made a promise to herself that once she was back on her feet, she would find ways to help others, just as she had been helped. After all, that was what Shaq had taught her, that sometimes the greatest gift you can give is showing someone they're not alone. The first week at her new job flew by in a whirlwind of activity. Walking into the dental practice each morning, the young mother felt a growing sense of confidence she hadn't experienced in months. Her colleagues had welcomed her warmly, and patients responded well to her gentle approach and genuine care. The office manager had even commented on how quickly she was getting back into the rhythm of dental assistance. What made the transition possible was the incredible childcare arrangement Shaq had helped coordinate. A retired teacher in the apartment complex watched her daughter along with 2 other children, creating a mini daycare filled with learning and laughter. Each evening when she picked up her daughter, she was greeted with artwork, new words learned, and stories of the day's adventures. One evening, as she was leaving work, she noticed a young woman sitting in her car in the parking lot, looking distressed. Something about the scene felt familiar, too familiar. Instead of walking past, she approached the car and gently knocked on the window, just as Shaq had done for her weeks ago. The woman inside was startled at first but slowly rolled down her window. Her story came tumbling out. She was 8 months pregnant, recently laid off, and living in her car while trying to figure out her next steps. Without hesitation, the young mother took out her phone and made a call to the social worker who had helped her. "Someone once showed me that I wasn't alone," she explained to the woman. "Now it's my turn to pass that on." Word of this encounter reached Shaq through the social worker. He immediately set his network in motion again, but this time with a twist. He encouraged the young mother to take the lead in helping. "You know better than anyone what she's going through," he told her. "Use your experience to guide her." This marked the beginning of something beautiful. The young mother found herself becoming an unexpected mentor, sharing not just resources and connections, but also the emotional support that comes from someone who has walked the same path. Her apartment became a safe space for other struggling mothers to gather, share stories, and find hope. The local news picked up this new development in the story, focusing not on celebrity involvement, but on the power of community and paying it forward. Other businesses and organizations began reaching out, wanting to create more structured support systems for families in crisis. The dental practice where she worked even started offering free dental checkups for families in transition. Shaq watched all of this unfold with pride but insisted on staying in the background. "This isn't about me anymore," he said during one of his visits. "It's about how one person's story can inspire others to take action." He did, however, continue to check in regularly, becoming something of an uncle figure to her daughter, who now had a collection of silly photos with the gentle giant. The apartment complex, too, had transformed. What started as one community helping a mother and child had evolved into a model of neighborhood support. The community garden expanded, with residents teaching each other about growing food and sharing harvests. A homework club formed in the community room, where children gathered after school to study together while parents took turns supervising. One Saturday morning, as she was tending to her small plot in the community garden, her daughter playing nearby with neighborhood friends, she reflected on how much had changed. Her bank account was slowly growing, she had a stable job she loved, and most importantly, she had a community that felt like family. Her journal, once filled with uncertainty and fear, now chronicled stories of hope and transformation. She had started helping other mothers create their own journals, encouraging them to document their journeys from crisis to stability. These stories became powerful testimonials, showing others that change was possible with the right support. The impact rippled further. Other communities began reaching out, wanting to learn how to create similar support networks. She found herself speaking at community meetings, sharing her experience not as a victim, but as someone who had found strength through the kindness of others and was now strong enough to lift others up. Shaq's initial act of kindness had sparked something much bigger than anyone had anticipated. It wasn't just about helping one family anymore, it was about changing how communities respond to families in crisis. The young mother often thought about that morning in the grocery store parking lot, how close she had been to turning away when Shaq knocked on her window. During one community gathering, as she watched her daughter play with other children whose families had similar stories of transformation, she overheard someone say, "It's amazing how one person's kindness can change so many lives." She smiled, knowing it wasn't just Shaq's kindness, but the willingness of an entire community to open their hearts and take action. That evening, she added another entry to her journal. "Today, I realized that sometimes our lowest moments are just the beginning of our greatest purpose," she wrote. What started as one NBA legend helping one homeless mother has become a movement of hope, proving that when we lift each other up, we all rise together. 6 months after that life-changing morning in the parking lot, the young mother stood before a room full of community leaders, business owners, and social workers. Her daughter, now crawling and babbling with increasing confidence, sat contentedly in Shaq's massive arms in the front row. The sight gave her strength as she shared her vision for a new initiative, the Parking Lot Promise. The program, inspired by her own experience, would create a network of safe spaces where struggling families could seek help without judgment. Local businesses would train their employees to recognize signs of families in crisis and connect them with immediate resources. It wasn't about handouts, it was about creating bridges to stability and dignity. Shaq had helped her develop the concept, drawing on his years of philanthropic experience. But he insisted that she take the lead, knowing her first-hand experience made her the perfect advocate. Sometimes the best solutions come from those who've walked the hardest paths, he'd told her during one of their planning sessions. The initiative gained momentum quickly. Gas stations, grocery stores, and shopping centers throughout Atlanta began displaying the safe space symbol, a simple design featuring a car and a house connected by a bridge. Employees received training on how to approach people sensitively and connect them with local resources. The dental practice where she worked became one of the first official partners, offering not just dental care but also a welcoming space for families to regroup and plan their next steps. What made the program unique was its focus on dignity and empowerment. Rather than treating families as charity cases, it created pathways to self-sufficiency. Local business owners offered job training and employment opportunities. Property managers worked with the program to provide flexible leasing options. Healthcare providers joined in, offering sliding-scale services to ensure families could maintain their health while rebuilding their lives. Her own apartment complex had become a model for community support. The property manager worked with her to develop a neighbor-to-neighbor program, where stable residents could mentor families in transition. The community room hosted weekly workshops on everything from financial literacy to job interview skills, led by volunteers from local businesses and organizations. One evening, as she watched her daughter play with other children in the complex's playground, she overheard two mothers talking about how the program had helped them avoid becoming homeless. Their conversation drifted to plans for their children's future, college savings accounts, after-school activities, dreams that had seemed impossible just months before. It struck her then how hope could be contagious, spreading from family to family, community to community. Shaq remained involved, but in a way that empowered rather than overshadowed the growing movement. He used his influence to connect the program with other NBA players and celebrities who wanted to replicate the model in their own cities. But he always emphasized that the real heroes were the community members who showed up day after day to support their neighbors. The local news ran a follow-up story, focusing on how one act of kindness had evolved into a systematic approach to preventing family homelessness. The reporter interviewed several families who had found stability through the program, each story unique but connected by threads of community support and personal determination. During the interview, the young mother shared something she hadn't told anyone except Shaq: she had started taking online classes in social work. Her experience had shown her the importance of having advocates who truly understood the challenges facing families in crisis. Sometimes, she explained, the most powerful help comes from someone who can say, "I've been there too." Her daughter, now walking with wobbly determination, had become the unofficial mascot of the program. Other parents drew strength from seeing how far they had come, from sleeping in a car to creating positive change in their community. The little girl's laughter in the halls of the apartment complex became a symbol of hope, a reminder that transformation was possible. The initiative's success caught the attention of city officials. They began studying the model, looking for ways to implement similar programs citywide. What started in one parking lot was becoming a blueprint for how communities could come together to prevent family homelessness before it reached crisis levels. 1 year to the day after Shaq had first knocked on her car window, the young mother organized a celebration in the apartment complex's courtyard. Families who had been helped by the program gathered alongside volunteers, business owners, and community leaders. Shaq, ever humble, tried to deflect attention, but she insisted on acknowledging how his initial act of kindness had sparked such widespread change. As she watched her daughter toddle between groups of people, accepting high fives and gentle pats, she thought about all the other children who would never have to know the fear of sleeping in a car, all because one person chose to knock on a window instead of walking by. Her journal entry that night was simple but profound. Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest moments of human connection. The young mother knew their work was far from over. There were still families out there facing the same struggles she had, still moments when the task seemed overwhelming. But now there was a pathway, a community, and a promise that no parent would have to face those challenges alone. As autumn leaves began to fall in Atlanta, the young mother found herself boarding a plane for the first time in years. Her daughter, now a curious toddler, sat excitedly by the window, with Shaq occupying the aisle seat of their row. They were headed to Phoenix, where another NBA legend had requested their help in setting up a similar program in his community. The transformation of her life continued to amaze her. From sleeping in a car to flying across the country as a community program consultant, the journey seemed almost unreal. Yet every step had been grounded in real experiences, hard work, and the unwavering support of a community that had become family. During the flight, she reviewed her presentation materials while her daughter colored in a book Shaq had brought for her. The Phoenix initiative would be the fifth city to adopt the Parking Lot Promise program. Each new location brought its own challenges and opportunities, but the core principle remained the same: building bridges between struggling families and communities ready to help. What made the program successful wasn't just its practical approach to preventing homelessness, it was the way it transformed communities. In Atlanta, former program participants had become mentors themselves, creating a continuous cycle of support and empowerment. The dental practice where she still worked part-time had inspired a network of healthcare providers to offer accessible services to families in transition. Upon landing in Phoenix, they were greeted by a group of local business owners and community leaders eager to learn from their experience. The young mother shared her story not with shame, but with purpose, knowing that each detail could help shape a program that would save other families from similar struggles. During the community meeting, her daughter played with local children in a corner of the room, their laughter providing a poignant backdrop to serious discussions about housing solutions and support networks. One of the Phoenix business owners, moved by the presentation, offered to convert part of his warehouse into a family resource center. Shaq, sitting quietly at the back of the room, beamed with pride as he watched her field questions with confidence and compassion. During a break, he pulled her aside. "Remember when you were worried about speaking in public?" he teased. "Now look at you, teaching others how to change their communities." The Phoenix visit sparked something unexpected. Other cities began reaching out, not just for program implementation but for training on how to build sustainable community support networks. The young mother found herself developing a training curriculum, drawing on her growing expertise in social work and her personal experience. Back in Atlanta, her apartment complex had become a learning hub for other communities. Visitors would come to observe their neighbor-to-neighbor mentoring program, the community garden that now fed dozens of families, and the after-school programs that helped working parents maintain stable employment. Her daughter, now attending the complex's daycare program, had become an embodiment of the program's success. The little girl would confidently greet visitors, showing them her favorite spots in the community garden or introducing them to her many aunties and uncles, the neighbors who had become extended family. One evening, after returning from Phoenix, she sat with Shaq in the community room, planning the next phase of the program. "You know what makes this work?" he asked, watching children play nearby. "It's not just about giving people things. It's about giving them a chance to rebuild their dignity and then helping others do the same." The program had begun tracking its impact, and the numbers were impressive. In Atlanta alone, hundreds of families had been prevented from experiencing homelessness. But the real success stories were in the details: the single father who now ran the community garden, the teenager who started a homework club for younger kids, the elderly neighbor who found purpose in providing childcare for working parents. Local businesses that had initially signed on as safe spaces reported unexpected benefits. Employee morale improved as they felt empowered to make a difference. Customer loyalty increased as communities recognized their commitment to social responsibility. What started as a humanitarian effort was proving to be good for business too. The young mother's social work studies were progressing well, with her experience informing her academic work and vice versa. She had started documenting the program's methodology, hoping to create a comprehensive guide for other communities. Her professors were impressed by how she integrated theoretical frameworks with practical, community-based solutions. One day, while updating her journal, now filled with stories of hope and transformation, she found her original entry from the morning Shaq had knocked on her car window. Reading it brought tears to her eyes, not from sadness but from amazement at how far they'd come. That evening, during the community's weekly dinner gathering, she looked around at the diverse group of people sharing meals and stories. Some were current program participants, others were volunteers or supporters, but the lines between giving and receiving help had blurred. They were simply neighbors, sharing life's journey together. As her daughter ran between tables, collecting hugs and treats from her many family members, the young mother reflected on how their story had grown beyond anything she could have imagined. What started with one act of kindness in a parking lot had become a movement, proving that when communities come together, extraordinary change is possible. 2 years to the day since that life-changing morning in the parking lot, the young mother stood in the grand ballroom of an Atlanta hotel. Her daughter, now a vibrant preschooler, wore a pretty blue dress and held tightly to Shaq's hand as they prepared to address the first national conference of the Parking Lot Promise Initiative. Representatives from 25 cities had gathered to share their experiences and learn from each other. The program had grown beyond their wildest dreams, but its heart remained the same: the simple belief that everyone deserves a chance to rebuild their lives with dignity and support. As she prepared to give the keynote speech, she thought about all the lives that had been touched by the program. In Atlanta alone, their original apartment complex had become a model of community support, with similar initiatives sprouting up across the city. The Safe Space Network had expanded to include not just businesses but schools, libraries, and community centers. Her daughter tugged at her sleeve, pointing excitedly at the presentation screen showing photos from their journey. There they were in the dental office where she still worked, now heading up their community outreach program. Another photo showed their community garden, which had grown into a full-scale urban farming initiative providing fresh produce to families in transition. Shaq, ever humble, had tried to stay in the background of the conference, but she insisted he join her on stage. "This story belongs to both of us," she told him. "It shows what can happen when someone chooses to see the person behind the struggle." His gentle smile and nod reminded her of that first morning, when he chose to knock on her car window instead of walking past. The conference room was filled with success stories. A businessman from Chicago shared how their local program had transformed his view of community responsibility. A single mother from Houston described how the program had helped her keep her family together while she completed her nursing degree. Each story was unique, but they all shared a common thread of hope and community support. During her speech, she shared something she'd never spoken about publicly before, the moment of despair she'd felt that morning in the parking lot, before Shaq appeared. "I thought I was invisible," she admitted, her voice strong despite the emotion. "But what I learned is that we're never truly invisible when we're part of a community that cares." The initiative had evolved far beyond its original scope. Cities had adapted the program to meet their specific needs while maintaining its core principles. Some had developed specialized job training programs, others focused on healthcare access or education support. But all of them understood that the key to success was treating families with dignity and providing comprehensive support. Her own daughter had become living proof of what was possible when communities came together. The little girl who had once slept in a car and now attended a high-quality preschool program, played with friends from diverse backgrounds, and had more aunties and uncles than she could count. She was growing up understanding the importance of community and the power of helping others. During the conference lunch break, Shaq gathered everyone for a surprise announcement. The NBA had decided to make the parking lot promise a league-wide initiative, with teams in every city committing to support local programs. The young mother felt tears welling up as she realized how many more families would be helped through this expansion. That afternoon, workshop sessions focused on practical aspects of program implementation. She led a session on building sustainable community support networks, sharing lessons learned from their experience in Atlanta. The room was packed with eager participants, each taking notes and asking thoughtful questions about how to adapt the program to their own communities. As she walked through the hotel lobby later that day, she overheard snippets of conversation from conference attendees, stories of hope, plans for implementation, ideas for expansion. What had started as one man's act of kindness had grown into a movement that was changing how communities approached family homelessness. In a quiet moment between sessions, she found herself standing next to Shaq, watching her daughter play with other children whose parents were attending the conference. "Did you ever imagine it would grow this big?" she asked him. His response was characteristic of his humble nature: "I just did what anyone should do, the rest was all you and the community." The conference concluded with a ceremony celebrating the program's achievements. Statistics were shared, thousands of families helped, hundreds of communities transformed, dozens of cities implementing the program. But the most powerful moment came when her daughter joined her on stage, holding up a drawing she'd made of their old car next to their new home, with a rainbow connecting the two. That evening, at a small gathering of original program participants and supporters, the young mother shared her latest news: she had completed her social work degree and been offered a position coordinating the national expansion of the parking lot promise. As everyone celebrated, she noticed Shaq watching from across the room, that same warm smile on his face that had given her hope 2 years ago. Later, as she tucked her daughter into bed in their cozy apartment, the little girl asked, "Mommy, do you remember when we lived in the car?" The question caught her off guard, but she answered honestly. "Yes, baby, I do. And I remember how many people helped us find our way home." Her daughter smiled sleepily. "And now we help other people find their way home too." As she made her final notes about the conference in her journal, she reflected on how a simple act of kindness had created ripples that continued to spread. The parking lot promise had become more than a program; it was proof that when communities come together, even the biggest challenges can be overcome, one family at a time.